Today, organizations have access to an incredible and growing array of AI solutions. Automation tools, co-pilots, agents, generative AI. There's no shortage of technology promising productivity gains. But here's the reality we see over and over again. AI initiatives struggle or fail not because the AI is bad, but because the organization doesn't truly understand how work is actually performed. And without that understanding, it becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, to guarantee a successful AI deployment. That's where Dataken comes in. At Dataken, our core belief is simple but powerful. You can't improve, automate, or augment work unless you first understand it at the level where it actually happens. Ollie is a human analytics platform designed to learn how work is truly performed across the organization, across roles, processes, applications, and behaviors. By observing real work as it happens, Ollie identifies where the biggest opportunities are, why they exist, and what type of intervention will actually drive the improvement. This is what allows Dataken to help organizations prioritize the right opportunities instead of guessing or relying on anecdotal feedback. And because we understand the flow and context of work, we can also determine the right moment to engage the workers, whether it's through coaching, nudges, micro-learning, or AI assistance. That timing and context is what drives faster ROI and more sustainable change. Another key principle behind Ollie is how insights are delivered. Most analytics platforms rely on people constantly checking dashboards, hoping someone notices a problem and then decides to act. But in reality, most users don't live in dashboards. Ollie flips the model. Instead of relying on users to come to the data, Ollie pushes insights and actions to users at the right time, directly within the flow of work. That's how insights turn into outcomes, not just reports. Now, that doesn't mean dashboards aren't important. We absolutely provide rich dashboards for super users, operational leaders, and analysts who want to explore patterns, validate hypotheses, and dive into the enormous amounts of data Ollie captures. These dashboards are powerful tools for understanding trends, measuring impact, and guiding strategy. But they're not the starting point. The starting point is understanding work as it truly happens and using that understanding to guide smarter AI adoption, better engagement, and meaningful improvement. With that foundation in mind, let's take a look at the Ollie dashboards and see how insights come to life. This is the executive summary dashboard. This is what I recommend we always go to first. It gives us a high-level overview of everything that's going on in the particular organization. The metrics are obviously going to be different dependent upon the organization and the type of work that they perform, but you can see a number of different indicators, and what you're really looking for are indicators that might show up in yellow or red, and that would be the places that you might start to drill down. So for this particular organization, it looks like the average active time per user is very deficient. There's a lot of notepad activity, which indicates copy-paste activity, maybe unsecure data. You can see the high total copy-paste count, a lot of non-production related effort. And as you start to look into the bins of activity, this starts to look at users that are active from 0 to 2 hours or 2 to 4 hours. And again, you can just visually see a number of users every day that are inactive. They're active at some point, so their computer has come on at some point in the day, but the activity levels are really low. On the upper end, you can see that there are also employees that have activity above 8 hours a day. And that could be a sign of burnout if people continue to do that over a long period of time. And then most importantly, we look at the company average versus the national average. And again, this is going to vary from company to company, but on the right-hand side, you can start to see a quantification of the possible opportunity if the company has shared their payroll information. So for this particular view, again, we said active time. A subset of the active time is that people are in production-related activities, and this shows much lower than the national average. There's not very much generative AI time, which would show an opportunity to increase the use of AI and an estimation, prediction of what the value of that might be. And then a lot of time that's spent in email and instant messaging. It's not a very efficient way to operate a business. Empirically, we know that to be the case. And so, again, we quantify that. And then the last thing is the process mining opportunity. And I'll talk a lot more about process mining a little bit later. The base operational dashboard is a very basic dashboard that I use to just get a high-level view of what's going on in the organization. This would be a kind of an entry-level overview. You can see the active hours, potential lost hours, assuming an 8-hour workday. And you see that for last week versus a 4-week time period. So again, you can start to see trend data around, are we getting better or are we getting worse? The active time and number of employees, you can see that for each day. And again, we can see that it's an interactive chart, but averaging under 5 hours of active time a day is not particularly great. And so that would give you insights into maybe doing things to keep people more active on their keyboards for longer periods of time. What drives that? This is a stacked bar chart. Talked about it in the executive overview. But again, what we continue to see from company to company is that there are a percentage of employees that are overperforming and they're subject to burnout and they're carrying a lot of the weight. And so you might be thinking about, what am I doing to incentivize them to stick around, to make sure that they're getting recognized for their contributions, but maybe also make sure that we have programs in place so that they're aware that we're aware that they're putting in a lot of effort and we want them here for the long term. And so we might need to be thinking about wellness and longevity type programs to keep those folks from burning out and getting ill or whatever the case may be. And then on the bottom here, you can see a substantial percentage of workers who are not on their machines for more than 2 hours or 4 hours respectively. And those are easy to nudge and get into performance quickly. And then if they aren't, then typically we refer those to HR and deal with that as more of a will issue than it is an awareness or skill issue. The operational dashboard is an opportunity to dig deeper into the organization. Here you can start to see the number of employees, again, a snapshot of the active effort and production effort, as well as uncategorized. And you're always going to have some percentage of uncategorized. This isn't a lot, 4%, 4.8%. So we're doing a good job of categorizing the activities and making sure that we're getting an accurate picture of what's going on. In this particular view, you can see out of 254 employees, we're getting about 235-ish employees to show up every day. So attendance looks pretty good. But again, we see this issue with active time. And so this view shows a view when we actually triggered some training, some motivational training to get active time to go up. And that training was implemented around the 18th or the 19th. And this starts to show you how that improves relatively quickly. A subset of active time is the amount of time spent in production effort. And for this particular view, as people were on their machines, they were active in production-related applications. So there's no concern about being focused on production-related effort. We're really just focused on active time. A lot of different views on how people are working. This is a view that shows how much is in production versus non-production versus uncategorized. Again, doing really good here, good performance as long as we keep people active on the machine. You can see direct versus indirect activity. There is quite a bit of indirect activity. And as we scroll down and look at the actual applications, you can see a lot of activity in Outlook, which would be email and in teams, which would be meetings. And for this particular company, email and meetings are internal focused. They're not interactions with customers. And so that's why it's considered indirect activity. And that could be an area of focus. Here you see the non-production applications. Again, it's not really a concern because that's such a small percentage of the overall. And you can see the top applications by user. Employee behavioral is a view of how employees are interacting throughout the day. Again, a slightly different view where you can start to drill into individual employees. It's anonymized, but you still start to see individual employees' behaviors relative to the workday. The first view is when the machine becomes active. And so in a traditional setting, if people are working from 8 to 5, and you start to see activities where the distribution of machines coming on is broad, then you know that you might have a punctuality type issue. Here, this is a workforce that works 24/7, and so there's staggered shifts, and so you can start to have a visual of when employees are coming in for the first shift, and make sure that that's meeting your demand. Again, you see the active count of bins by time. That's a common view that most companies don't really take a look at, and so that's why you see that dashboard over and over again, as that's something that people often want to look at. And then uncategorized applications, again, you can start to see that there are ways to go and look, and again, where you have total active hours up in the more than an hour of time, then you would go and say, okay, we need to investigate what this X shell 4 activity is and categorize it. I'm relatively sure this would be production related application, and that would just get that much more production percentages up. Once we've decided what some of the goals and objectives that we want to focus on, we can configure all the assistants to start changing behaviors. Team Insights gives us visibility into how those AI agents are being activated to make sure that they're firing and training the employees like we expect. So again, we've anonymized kind of who the different users are, but you can start to see here that for people that have low chronic active time, which has been the issue that we've seen across the board, you can see the number of times that someone has been trained on that particular issue. We also saw that there are some users who have excessive keystrokes per second, which probably means that they're gaming the system by putting weight on the keyboard or putting a penny inside the keyboard to keep the keystrokes working. And so where we start to see that excessive keystroke activity, again, we can go and trigger agents to make sure that the individual understands that that's not appropriate. And then we see content access monitoring. And again, all this is sortable. And so you can see the worst abuser of content is this hashed user, but almost 42 minutes in Amazon Prime during the workday. And again, you can see a number of different things that we've captured. And so all of these could be items that then you either train another AI agent to go and act on, or if it is excessive and the AI agents have already been triggering and there's no activity, then again, we recommend referring it to HR. Here's the uncategorized, and again, you see that X-shell, but that's the only real big manager team that has much activity that hasn't been categorized, and then some of the same charts that you've seen and we've discussed already. Here's an example of an individual employee dashboard. And again, we don't really recommend dashboards because it can be a distraction, but if individuals want to see their performance This is highly configurable, and you can customize it to whatever you think the individual needs to see. This is another example of a dashboard. This one's for a customer support manager. And again, you can see it has a very different look and feel. A lot of different things that can be looked at, points from gamification, training that's been accomplished, contest results, and the like. And so again, lots of different options. Depending upon if you need dashboards for individuals, dashboards for managers, customized to different titles. Very easy to design how to meet your needs. The collaboration portion of the dashboards have to do with chat, email, and meetings. Here in the chat metrics, you can see a number of different dashboards that help you understand what is driving the chat behavior. And again, this would be important if you see a lot of chat activity. Usually that has to do with a few individuals who are driving a disproportionate amount of the chat. And so the different dashboards can help you figure out where that chat is occurring, what might be the root cause, and then what actions you want to take. Email dashboards look very much like chat. Again, you're trying to determine who are the culprits that might be sending emails or replying to emails and causing ripple effects where a lot of different people are having to address something that really could be addressed by a single individual. And so a lot of different ways that you can look at the data. And again, as you start to find the subjects that are driving it, that can really help you learn triggers that you want to use for coaching opportunities. Here we're looking at event metrics. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of meetings that are hosted and accepted, and you can see the total time allocated in each of these. And as we scroll through the different views, you can see that we're looking at things by title. We can see actual meetings, and you can scroll through the actual sessions that are going on. And then here we're starting to look at the actual title of the meetings so that at a glance you can start to see where the most minutes are being allocated by the title of the meeting. So a number of different ways that you can look at it. Again, the key being it's a lot of data, and then how does Ollie take a look at that data? We'll now pivot over to process mining, and the chart that we look at first is the financial dashboard. And you can see here that across the top, you can understand that the number of repetitive tasks that were identified were 12. There's 115 automation opportunities. And if 100% of these opportunities were automated or eliminated, it would result in a benefit of $1.5 million across only 133 employees. So you could theoretically have significant impact. The key to our approach around process automation is that we really don't try to assemble the process end to end. We break down process into individual tasks, and then we use and leverage our algorithms to look for common tasks that are being performed by similarly situated people. And our algorithms identify those things that are more apt to be eliminated or automated. In this particular example, you can see that this group used Salesforce CRM. The tasks and the sub-applications are aggregated up to the big application, Salesforce in this particular example. And so there's activity that's going on in Salesforce CRM to Salesforce CRM, and the cost and time associated with this is really, really high. And so there's additional filters that are available in the live environment, not in a demo environment, because there is just so much data that is mined to get to this type of information that would let you know specifically which sections within Salesforce CRM are driving this type of behavior. And then you could turn on computer vision if you really wanted to understand exactly what the data elements are that you could expose and eliminate this type of repetitive motion. The next one's between Salesforce and Slack. The next one's between Salesforce, and an analytics dashboard. And so there's just a lot of swivel chair type activity, and you can go on down the list. This is what process really looks like when it comes to humans. It's hard to see the big kind of circle there that's identifying the amount of activity. The thickness of the line tells you the amount of activity that's happening within Salesforce CRM. And then you can see this going over to Slack, quite a bit of activity here. And again, all this is movable so that you can start to see the thickness of the lines here. And that's based on a time scale. We also look at it from an automation coefficient, and there's a number of other charts that you can look at. And if you wanted to drill in by team, you'd be able to go down below and see the teams that are in particular having this repetitive type action, and that might help you further drill down into possible solutions. As I mentioned, within process mining, there's a lot of graphic analysis, and so we'll look at these different graphs and charts. Again, this is really intended for super users. When you look at a copy-paste scale, you can see how it's a little more linear in nature, just because you're only looking at those tasks that are tied to copy and paste activity. When you're looking at a lot of keystroke activity, this is how the charting would change. Again, you see a lot of keystroking CRM to CRM, but then this is where you see the Google workspace. Here's where you see Slack and chat and the dashboard. So again, you get some sense of what's going on with different types of activity if your customer's wanting to focus on certain types of activity that they want to eliminate. This is the frequency of the repetitive actions. Here's the number of users that are impacted by these, and you can see it's relatively everybody across this particular team is equally impacted by these common repetitive type activities. And ultimately you get, there's the time scale, but ultimately you get into our proprietary coefficient, and that is where we start to see where these opportunities are, and ultimately this is what results in that financial chart. Again, these are interesting, but probably not things that you would necessarily show to customers because they're not highly actionable. It just might give you ideas of specific areas that you want to look at, and you can change the number of intersection nodes and drill into just those most common nodes structure, and you can see what's going on there. So hopefully that helps you understand the concept of process mining, and in particular how we approach it from a task mining perspective, and tackle the most complicated tasks that drive inefficiency and cost into the business.